Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott. And this is Hot Pursuit.
And we're in the same studio.
I know, it's so nice.
It is really great.
It's so easy and fun.
I'm very excited to see you. I'm so glad you're here.
Likewise.
I'm
in the
super
flesh.
pumped. There's an event at the Classic Car Club,
Yes.
TWR, which is kind of like the AMG of Jaguar from back in the day. Not current Jaguar.
Yes.
But old Jaguar, is putting out a car that your husband Magnus also advised them on. So it's like an event that I've been looking forward to all week long.
It's going to be fun.
Magnus put out a really cool like night driving video, and I watched it a few times, and then I just started leaving it on the background.
Ooh, cool.
Because it's a supercharged V12 engine, and it's just a sound I want to hear in my life, you know?
Yeah, I can relate to it.
So I'm excited about that. And there's also a ton to talk about because you've had an incredible week.
Yeah, I'm technically on vacation this week, but I did just go to Phoenix to drive this new Dodge Charger EV, which, judging from my social media, everybody hates. But I'm here to tell you it's not that bad. And I did drag racing for the first time in my life on a real drag strip. And
I saw the video. It's like all prepared. And
it's like the real thing with the Christmas tree lights that, go from like pre-stage to stage to go. It was really fun. I might have a new hobby.
But wait, it's not that bad isn't exactly a ringing endorsement. So first, tell us about this car, because it's called a Charger, right?
Yes.
But it has two doors like the Challenger and...
Yes. This is the Dodge Charger Daytona, and it is a pure electric vehicle. This is the two-door version. They will also be releasing a four-door version and an internal combustion version over the next few years. So this is the first of a completely new lineup. They're releasing it in two variants. There's the Daytona RT, and then the higher level, the more powerful version, which I really recommend you get if you're going to get one, which is the Scat Pack. The Scat Pack is almost 700 horsepower and a lot more torque and just a lot rowdier to drive. I did drive both on the track, and we had a road course, and then we did some sort of drag strip things, not really racing, but just for time. What
was your time?
Well, in the 11s.
Oh, that's good.
Low 11s.
That's very good.
I will tell you one thing, and I have the receipts. I'll have to show them to you, but it's so counterintuitive to have both your feet pushed hard down as far as you can and then lift off the brake. And there was at one point, I lifted off the gas, and I was like, nothing's happening. I was like, I lifted the wrong foot. But it's so. Have you ever done that?
I've never
cool.
drag raced. I would love to. I have to say,
fun.
Just watching your video made me feel nervous because I feel like I would screw up. And
it's not as easy as it looks.
It would hurt my ego. It doesn't seem like it's easy. I mean,
they kind of just throw you in. There wasn't a lot of prep. And so you kind of just have to learn as you go. And I did 3 passes, and I think, my best time was like 11.7 or something. But I know if I had 3 more passes, I could get it, I bet. And if I got the guy out of the passenger seat, who probably weighed over 200 pounds, if I got him out, I got a lighter car, I could probably hit 11.5. But it is counterintuitive, and you really do have to creep the car forward. And by the time the green light comes, you're already feeling like you're trying to catch up. So it's kind of like you have to get the hang of it, for sure.
What was the fastest time achieved, like by a factory driver?
Oh, by a factory driver, I don't know. That day, it was a media day. I heard someone got an 11.4, but I did not personally witness it, so I don't know.
All right, so there's so much hate for this car because it's an EV.
Because it's sacrilegious.
You've driven, I imagine, a normal Challenger or Charger, so you know that they're like big American V8. But did this not have a similar feeling? Did it feel like a muscle car?
The Scat Pack actually felt tactile, and I'm not going to say that it felt like an internal combustion car. It doesn't. But it still feels tactile. There is a noise and a vibration. It does ignite your senses. It's not.
The noise comes from the fratsonic chamber.
Yeah. Now, the noise, it does sound a little like a movie recording, but from a distance, maybe it would sound real, quote
But what about from the driver's seat? Is it a pleasing noise? Did it make you want to push the...
On the drag strip, it was cool. On the highway, driving on the highway out to the national park where we drove, it was annoying and I wanted to turn it off. And you can turn it off.
You can turn it on and off.
You can turn it off. I made sure to ask. So, I think the question is not whether the core Charger and Challenger people will buy this car. I don't think they will. But I did hear some interesting ideas that this car could appeal to a Tesla buyer who is sort of fed up with Elon's antics and whatever and are looking for another two-door, obviously Tesla doesn't make two doors, but looking for a sporty two-door electric vehicle. There's nothing that's sporty with two doors.
Right.
That's electric. Now, obviously, Porsche has the 718 coming, but it's not for sale yet. So if you could kind of say there is a space in the market for a two-door muscle car.
Well, also, the Tesla's so Spartan. Mm-hmm. I've never appreciated the interior, and one of the things I love about my Challenger is the interior. Yeah. It's big, it's roomy, but it's laid out very well.
Yes.
As a driver's car.
I really like the interior in the Charger. The rear seat is really spacious and roomy. It has a really nice feeling where you feel intimate inside it, but not cramped at all. The dash is great. It feels like you're in a Mopar car. It doesn't feel retro necessarily, but they did a good job with it. I'm a big fan of the interior. They still have sort of the pistol grip shifter in it, which is cool. Honestly, it's not bad. And it looks cooler in real life than in photos. I don't think it photographs well. But in real life, I love the white ones. I thought they were very cool. So not all bad.
All right. I still need to get more info on the fratsonic chamber because I actually like a lot of fake sounds.
Yeah, I know you do.
But I feel like it's more okay for me to like fake sounds if they're sort of created naturally in some device rather than synthesized and pushed through the speakers.
Yes. This was synthesized. I mean, it sounds sort of like you're in a movie theater where the sound, comes up around you.
Dolby, like,
yeah, exactly. There is an element of that. But honestly, we were at Radwood Raceway. It's the old Bob Bondurant track. I think it's called Radwood now in Phoenix. And from a distance across the track, we were doing hot laps. It sounded almost real. So not all bad.
I'm glad you brought up Radwood because we are going to talk to McKeel Hagerty today. And Radwood, isn't that a term sort of generally used for 90s and early 2000s cars?
That is a quirky car show that Hagerty owns. Okay. Yes.
Well, the thing is, I looked at his list, and we'll talk about this with him as well, but literally half of the cars on his list, and this is every year now Hagerty comes out with the bull market list, which is the cars that they think are good to buy now and will appreciate. More than half of the list is from the 90s or the 2000s. In fact, half is from this century, which I thought was really weird. The average age of the cars on his list is 2001. And previously, it had been like 87 or 89 the last couple of years.
But I do remember every year the age has inched closer to us. Yeah. So this is a continuation of that trend. And it has to be the 30-year cycle where whatever you grow up idolizing, by the time you can finally afford it, 30 years have passed-ish, right? So doesn't it stand to reason that it's now 2025, that 25 years ago, around the year 2000, the people who, whatever you were idolizing then, like late 90s Michael Jordan era into 2000 is now what we want. And I have to imagine it's just more of that.
Yeah, it totally makes sense when you put it that way. It's just that no matter what year it is, the golden age of cars is always going to have been the 50s and 60s.
You think?
Yes. I mean,
you know what? I really think those cars from the 50s and 60s are becoming like how we think of pre-war cars, completely.
Maybe you're right.
Outdated,
I mean, I always think, for example, classic rock, right?
Yeah.
You're never going to get music that's better than it was in the 60s and 70s. But maybe that's because I'm 50 years old.
Yes.
Maybe kids today are like, man, the 90s is where it's at. Like Third Eye Blind is the best.
The 90s is classic now.
Well, all right, let's get into our interview with McKeel Hagerty. He's the CEO of Hagerty Insurance, which also now obviously does media, events, and auctions. I have been so excited to have you on for so long because I've been watching your company grow. I've been reading, Hannah's written a few stories about it. And I just think it's so fascinating that you have gone from an insurance company to this media and events and auctions conglomerate. And just explain to our listeners about your business if you can.
Yeah, well, it all starts with this kind of core love of the automobile. And we have this kind of human connection with cars and objects and things in our lives. And it was a family business. It started in the basement of the house I grew up in. And my mom and dad just said, look, if people really care about things and really care about cars, then from a pure insurance standpoint, which was the business they were in, then that means there's better risk. But, insurance is kind of a boring topic. And mostly because I was talking about negative things that happen. And what we love about the car world is it's about the fun, it's about the passion, it's about competition, it's about style and design and all those things. And we get to play with the fun parts of it. And the core business was insurance, and it grew and grew and grew. And we were, really getting traction in the U.S. and around the world. And I realized that, if we really wanted to spin the flywheel faster, to use the pun fully intended, was that we needed to be a little bit more in the entertainment side of the business. We needed to be more in the buy-sell side of the business. We needed to be in the event space around the business. And so it all kind of works together. It's like this ecosystem. And it's fun. So we insure, millions of cars, but we also, we have events. We have this auction business that we acquired after we went public a couple of years ago, and which is really cool. And we think it will be an important part of what we do over time. And we're just having a blast because we get to play with cars and honor other people's cars and cool cars and people in the car world.
McKeel, I'm so curious. You mentioned going public. That was 2021. How has your life changed since then? I mean, that was a radical. I mean, the going public was probably the end or maybe the beginning of this transformation, but you guys have really gone through such a transformation.
Well, I had hair back then, 3 years ago. That was, I miss my hair. No, it was, ultimately, there's just this presumption, I think, when businesses are really growing that everybody just assumes you're going to sell it. And I think, when are you going to sell it? Are you going to build this thing and flip it? And my view was I believe so much in the mission of what we're doing we have this kind of mission we write down and talk about, which is to save driving for future generations. And I knew that I could never do that if the company was sold. And of course, we're the type of business that lots of companies would love to acquire. And I just said, look, I think the best way to set it up for the long haul is we go public, because it's got a lot of paperwork going public. I can tell you that much, but it kind of sets itself up to perpetuate itself long haul. Mm-hmm. And it would give us capital to do kind of other cool things, and it would put the disciplines in place that you kind of need when you're running a bigger business. So the going public part was pretty cool, like ringing the bell in New York on the New York Stock Exchange. And there's all this, like I said, lots of paperwork and lots of, corporate-y stuff. But I focus on as much of the external piece and our brand and our events and interfacing with customers and partners as I can. And it's fun. It's a really cool business.
What have you found is the most successful? Because, some of the stuff you do, I consume so much media. I'm watching the stuff that you're producing, listening to the podcast that you are making, but it can't be very profitable, right? That's why you see road and track and motorcyclists, disintegrating into nothing. So on the other hand, you have the auctions business that Hannah follows so closely. You made a big acquisition there with Broad Arrow. The events are iconic with Villadesta, coming up. What have been the successes, and what have been the parts where you see, oh, this is not working out?
Yeah, when I started growing up in this business, I loved automotive media. I loved the magazines, and I loved some of the early television shows when they came on, and so many of the online properties. And you're actually, other than like big time kind of sports, you're hard pressed to think of a hobby or a pastime that had so much great media around it than the automotive world, and it's definitely been shrinking. It's there are so many fewer magazines. The businesses are tough. Even some of the efforts at television, I think, are really challenged financially. So, there's that phrase in business, like, is it an iceberg or is it an ice cube? And my view was, okay, look, we've got a great underlying business. Why not really invest in things like media and some of the things that are hard to do? They may not make as much financial sense, but they're also not completely horrible. And so we've actually been really pleased with our media efforts. I mean, the reach of what the team is doing, both online, and we're still really committed to print. And now by audited circulation, we have the highest circulation car magazine in the world.
Interesting.
And we're just going to keep doing it. Like, great photography, great writers, just do good stories, because it's what a little bit of it is like, it's what I want to read. And I think it creates that kind of high ground in the car world that we still need, rather than it just kind of devolving into, cell phone videos and things like this. Nothing wrong with some of that, but we think there's room for higher quality stuff. Now, back to the first part of the question, though, there's no doubt about it that, events and media are not the biggest businesses. We think the marketplace business will be important for us over time. And part of it is, just like in the last 12 months, our customers, members, bought and sold about 300,000 vehicles. And that was about $14.5 billion worth of transactions. And so we see that kind of from a data standpoint. And when everybody talks about, some of the great online auction sites like, Bring a Trailer or Cars and Bids, or you think of the big other live auction houses, all together, they both total on an annual basis about $4 billion worth of transactions. So for us, it was like, okay, look, I'm not sure, anybody just naturally needed another auction business, but we felt like they needed a better option when it came to kind of trust and the way we could invest in things that others may not be able to. So we think that's going to be a fun part of what we do. We think it's a great way to tell stories about cool cars. Like, we were, talking before about, it's just fun to talk about great cars coming up for sale. It's a lot more fun to talk about them coming up for sale than it is insuring them. And nothing wrong with insurance. Like, it pays for me to be here. But it's fun to talk about what people are shopping for. So,
well, I was going to ask, how much of the core business is still the insurance business? And also, I know the auction market this year has been kind of weird.
Yeah.
Can you just give us sort of a review on the year about auctions, and does that affect the insurance business side of things too?
Yeah. Yeah. So, right now we're 92% of the revenue is insurance, and part of this, we're just growing so much. Mm-hmm. I mean, this year we'll add about 275,000 new members to our membership in insurance world, which is a cool number, given that like the biggest car club in the world is like a little over 100,000. So it's just a big group of car people coming together. But we, on the car market space, there's no doubt about it that, kind of there was a real high post-COVID.
Sure.
People just like RVs and boats and camping and everything else.
YOLO.
In the car world, right? And the car world saw a big boom. It peaked somewhere around like December of 2022. And it's okay. Just because something is off a peak doesn't mean it's bad.
It's not a disaster.
It's not a disaster, but definitely, we've seen these kind of dips before. We saw it like post-financial crisis. I remember it after the dot-com bust 25 years ago when, it got really hot, and then it feels like it's pulling back, but it's more rationality. So, the live auctions were off about 12% in 2024. Digital auctions and those kind of mechanisms were down about 5%. So not a disaster, because when you say they're off against like huge highs. And so maybe it's just a little bit of kind of rebalancing in there. Definitely we saw it even like this summer that some segments of kind of older vintage cars didn't seem to have the kind of demand. But then we see new kinds of vehicles that have more demand. And there's some clear trends that this kind of I don't want to call them the next generation. I call them like the rising generation of collectors. They're the ones that are rising, and they get to do cool stuff. And they have different tastes. And someday, we hope is that as their tastes mature, as all of our tastes have matured when it comes to cars, that they'll want to buy more of that cool old stuff too.
My tastes have gotten more juvenile.
I was going to feel like we need to discuss what you mean by different tastes here.
Because
Tell us.
When you're young, you buy, you may have a poster of the fastest car that is available on your wall, but you can't afford it.
Yeah.
And so you buy, what you like. And, the trends that are definitely different than we saw in the past with these rising generations are, clearly, Japanese cars are not just kind of a accidental thing. They're a big part of the car world. They always were, but they're a big part of collecting. Clearly,
and you see that continuing.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And you see kind of even less performance oriented variants now becoming hot.
Interesting.
So that's kind of interesting because everybody wants the best of the best, but if you can't afford the best of the best, or there's just so few of them, then you go for the next best.
Wait, what are we talking about here? I know the Datsun 280ZX is on your list.
I'm in a Prelude.
Oh yes. Oh, by the way, dude, my best friend,
right?
in high school had a Honda Prelude with a stick. It was like 1990, I think.
Yeah.
And that car was the sickest.
Yeah,
I mean.
Right?
I've been thinking about that ever since, but I've never really seen it brought up until you put it out on your list.
They're manual. They were super reliable. They're just a great car, and they built a lot of them. They were sold mostly on the coast in the U.S., and those markets were much more comfortable with them. They weren't a muscle car crowd. It wasn't that they weren't hot rodders, and so it makes sense that it's an affordable entry point. I keep waiting for someday the Ford Probe is going to make it on our list, but it's not quite there yet. So no offense to all the Ford Probe owners out there.
Do we want to dive into the bull list? I know Matt is dying to.
Before we get there, I want to ask about a car, Hannah, you probably care more about, which is the Ferrari, the 19.
Oh, yeah.
It's a 59 GT 250 California.
Long wheelbase, California.
So it's not
Spider.
It's not exactly the one that Cameron's dad had in Ferris Bueller.
This is the one he dreamed about having.
So this, I mean, when we talk about a down market for the collector car world, that doesn't include cars like this, right? It's still going to go for top dollar. And you're selling it at Amelia Island.
For sure, yeah. This will go at the Amelia sale in March 7th and 8th. And so this will be kind of one of the star cars there. And this is a $12, $14 million car. But it's one that's so rare because it's an aluminum-bodied, one of 8, Le Mans raced, great provenance, the whole thing, owned by great collectors, which really helps because they kind of did the work to make sure they bought good stuff. So this is, somebody's chance to buy a Mona Lisa kind of car. And plus it's just super cool. I mean, these things are just amazing. And no, these cars, well, look, they too can have cycles price-wise, but a big part of the car world that, we don't talk about or no one talks about when it comes to say auction results and everything else is, despite all of this stuff, there's lots of private sales that happen in the multi-million-dollar category. And so
I get the sense that's a big chunk of revenue.
It's huge. It was a huge part for us this year. Like those teams, the auction specialists, and they're constantly they're not waiting for an auction to sell something if somebody wants to buy.
And this is also because a lot of people want to be more discreet with what they buy and sell. This is nothing like backdoor. This is just private sales,
right?
And not public auctions.
Yeah, because I think it's that people want to have a little discretion and they want to be private.
It's a safety issue. It's a security issue. It's also tone. I mean, it's been a rough year for a lot of people. Does it look great if you're spending $15 million on a Ferrari and you're the boss of the shop? Yeah.
Or you had to lay a bunch of people off.
Sure.
But these cars come up so infrequently that when they do come up, it's amazing how people clamor for them to just say, no, that's the one. I've been waiting for it, and here it is. Got to go.
I'm curious, and this is just from my own background. What is the thought process with this Ferrari, this 1959 Ferrari 250 GT, between having it sold privately or publicly? Like, do you advise the person who comes to you and says, I want to sell this car? Do you say, actually, we think it would do better on the public market versus privately? How does
that's a big part of it. So this mythical role of auction specialists, like they're actively working with collectors constantly to say, are we upsizing? Are you downsizing? Are you shifting from one era or type of car to another? And that's the whole thing. Everybody wants to get the most money for a car that they can, but it's all like, again, being careful of the market or making sure you're not
rates,
selling. Yeah, interest rates.
Election year.
Yeah, well, I think interest rates probably were as much driving this kind of softness in the market as anything, because when everybody's feeling flush and everybody's buying everything they want at practically 0% interest, that affects very, very wealthy people as well, like because they're feeling really great about what they can buy, and when interest rates are at a different level, it changes confidence, I guess. So,
and that applies to people who are spending a lot of money on blue chip cars. It doesn't just affect those of us on more of a budget.
Right. I mean, because they're affected by all of the same issues. Yeah. They just have more zeros in some cases. So, what we see though is there was an age cohort that, are often referred to as the baby boomers, and they were the biggest car collecting generation ever. And they bought, many of them, great stuff when they were at lower prices, and the cars are probably mostly fully valued. And some of them want to downsize, or they want to simplify their life. One of the interesting characteristics of that baby boomer generation, if you look at it outside of money, is that they tend to try to simplify things later in life. And it's just like, okay, I have a great big life and I have homes, or I do a lot of stuff. I want less.
More money, more problems.
Yeah, well, but even if it's just I want to clean out my closets, or I want to get rid of some of the books in my library, they just don't want all the clutter. And so, they kind of have this, the baby boomer kind of started as the flower child generation, became incredibly consumerist, consumer driven.
They have $75 trillion.
Yes, but then as they get older, they simplify.
Yep.
And so, and that's so what we'd expect is, and then there's this other interesting trend related to it, which is, we find more of the larger collectors wanting to liquidate their cars while they're alive. And whereas, like my dad's generation, he passed away, he would have been 90 or whatever this last year, those big collectors, they just kind of died with their boots on and let their families deal with the mess after, hey, go ahead, sell these 40 cars or whatever I have. And
what
the new
changed?
generation, it's like, I think just a little, I don't know, maybe more of a, reality around mortality or something like this, which
astute financial planning.
Yeah,
I think
for
sure.
So. I think so.
By the way, speaking of your dad, before we get into the list, and I want to get to it because we're not all rich baby boomers.
Sure.
But
certainly,
I was thinking about. So my dad had some cars that are not amazing, but they're like part of family lore, and I think in Hannah's family the same is true.
Me too.
So what were the Hagerty cars that really mean something to you and your life growing up?
No, thanks for asking. Because, in the end, like, we can talk about dollars and cents all you want. These cars are important to me and for most people, most of the millions of people who are into it, because of what the cars mean to them, not what they're worth.
Yeah.
And, we did not grow up with Ferraris in the garage. Those were not cars that we had. We were a Ford family, ironically, a Ford family and a Porsche family. My great-grandfather worked for Fords. There was always a lot of Fords. My dad was restoring cars in the garage. Each of my sisters and I got to restore cars with him. But you buy something out of the newspaper and work on it. My oldest sister restored with him a Corvair Lakewood station wagon, which we sadly sold at some point. And then my middle sister had and still has a 1960 356B Roadster Porsche, which is her baby. She drives it every single night. And mine that I bought for $500 was a 1967 Porsche 911S. And so I always say, like, $500. Well, that was by far the best car deal I've ever made in my life. But I also say, look, it's priceless to me. I would never get rid of that. And it's the first car I drive every spring, and it's the last car I put away when the snow starts to fly.
And you worked on it at home with your dad.
Yeah, no, I did the whole thing, and just that pride of restoring it, owning it, driving it. That will always be the most important car to me. And then there were a bunch of cars my dad had that I was able to kind of bring into the kind of collection that our both employees and team members and everybody gets to see, and that's really fun. So for me, driving one of the cars that was important to my dad was just, it's like communing with him, and it's just been it's been a great thing. It's really, I don't care what they're worth. It's just being with Dad.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Do you take that 911S on rallies? Is
that
one of the cars that you drive?
Well, funny thing, I grew up in northern Michigan. I still live there. One of the cool things I started doing probably about 10 years ago is realizing, like, there are all these great roads out there. I've got this cool car I've had for 40 years almost. I started shipping it around and driving it on roads I always wanted to drive on with it.
Cool.
I mean, I went to college in Southern California, but my dad wouldn't let me bring the Porsche to drive up Highway 1. He just said, "No, you don't want an old car at college." I'm like, "Yeah, I do."
Actually, yes, I do.
Yes, I do. So it wasn't until just a few years ago that I finally like, darn it, I need to ship this thing to L.A. and drive it up to Big Sur, which I did, and it was just it was awesome. So,
did you ever consider living in California, by the way?
Or someplace other than Michigan?
I know where you went to college. You lived there during school, but California is such a big car hub, too.
Well, and it's kind of like culturally, I mean, strangely in the car world, everybody thinks I'm from California.
Yes.
I don't know why. It's maybe it's not the way I'm dressed
it's the tan.
today. It's the tan and my bad
You have the
hairline.
mentality of it, though, driving up Highway 1.
I think so. And my wife was from there, too.
Yes.
So, we met there. And, California, L.A. will always be a big part of our life. And I've been involved with the Peterson Museum forever. And, I love L.A. The whole L.A. car culture is awesome.
All right, let's get to this list.
Sure. Yes.
Because
the
there's a
list.
couple. I have questions.
Sure.
About some of these vehicles. Let's start with another Ferrari that's not going to go for $14 million, and that is the one that Tom Cruise drove at the beginning of Rain Man, right? The 400. What is it? 412.
Yeah, 400, 412.
Is this just on the list because you think it's affordable and it's hit the bottom of where it could
Well, it was
trade?
probably more bottomed out before. I just think it's definitely, again, if you, other than Porsche, and I love Porsches, like the Ferrari brand has been the strongest brand at the top end of the collecting world forever. And, these 400s they didn't make a lot of 2+2s. And some of them were like much maligned by the car world. But this is kind of one of the latest versions where we've started seeing increasing values in them, more people liking them, people not feeling embarrassed at all to own them. They just think they're kind of cool.
Was that a thing, like embarrassment?
Yeah, well, there was the famous the predecessor to this, the 365, I believe, was often referred to as the Queen Mother or
boy.
Queen Mary, Queen Mother, either one. And it was just because it was like big, ponderous looking Ferrari for the time. But I'm like, but this is a V12, seriously cool car. It just doesn't have maybe the same. It's the looks are a little
Underloved.
Underloved.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it's a cool car. They're interesting to see.
I have to ask about the E-Type.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this is an iconic model. You guys have said the 1961 to 1964 era E-Type. I want to talk about that, but I also want to hear your thoughts on the new Jaguar rebranding.
Right.
Because this is such an iconic car, and what do you think about the rebrand?
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
Which, by the way, they say that the concept car somehow harkens back to the
something
E-Type.
like the E-Type.
Which
Yeah,
is,
so, okay.
Enzo Ferrari may have said it's the most beautiful car that was ever made.
Long hood. It has a long hood.
Okay.
That's all I
Okay.
can think
That's a
of,
starting
right? Okay,
point.
I'm
Yeah.
starting.
All right.
So a couple thoughts. Well, first, E-Types, if you think about if I talked about Ferrari being like at the top of the game in the collecting world, no brand has risen faster than Porsche in the last decade. It's just been amazing to see, and both, coupled with, all these, influencers building really super cool cars, and then just the amazing, weapons grade machines that Porsche keeps making. So they've been really on the rise. Jaguar's kind of been left in the dust a little bit that
It's
way.
like the opposite of Porsche.
It really is. Yeah, the exact opposite. Like, I loved some of the Ian Callum designs when he was leading the shop there. And because they were kind of cool, they were kind of muscular, but they just aren't thought of in the same way today as
Well, they don't
as
have
a
nearly the
911.
same quality. Like you could have a Porsche and never take it to your mechanic.
Well,
right?
that's right. And so there's all that stuff. There's quality stuff, and there's, they're just maybe uninspired performance or whatever. But the E-Type was undeniably beautiful looking. And, if Enzo Ferrari said that it was the most beautiful car in the world, we're just going to go with it. I think he probably did. And so the Series 1, which was the, first series, and they made them in a few, and the last ones, weren't necessarily the best.
They made them until the mid-'70s.
Yeah, and the V12 ones right there at the end were kind of they were more challenged, but these early ones were really pure. They really are beautiful, and what we've seen in this kind of emerging list, like this list that we put together every year, is like it's a change in somebody's interest in things, and I think this is maybe okay. This is a new group of collectors saying like, okay, maybe these have been overlooked, maybe they're kind of on the rise. And
is that at rock bottom? Are you saying it's at rock bottom?
I'm not saying it's at rock bottom.
It can only go up.
I think it's like people look. Cars are always about signaling, right? So it's this is an identity thing, and I think an E-Type. Nothing says I'm Mad Men more than or I'm cool than an E-Type. I think it really does. So I think that's maybe why
goes well with tweed.
Yeah, I mean, and and. Really fancy coffee drinks.
What do you think the price? I mean, we didn't talk about that with the Ferrari. The Ferrari 400, 412. What do you pay for a decent one? Like 50, 40?
Yeah, at the bottom end, and then 80, 90.
And the E-Type for a decent one in running order. I'm not talking about a Concours example, but what do you pay for an early E-Type in decent shape?
Yeah, I mean, you can pay as little as $75,000 and as much as $200,000. So they're definitely, these are not bargain basement cars, and it's one of the most expensive cars on the list. But it's just surprising that it's seeing new interest. And I don't know, again, because I've always felt that if you look in the car world, it's not what people want now; it's what the alternatives are. And we realized a few years ago when Mercedes, especially really valuable Mercedes, were up like fully valued and people were selling them, the very next car, like a Gullwing owner or something, the very next car they bought was a vintage 911. And I kind of want that. That was an indicator. It's an indicator, and so I kind of think that this is signaling something. We're just gonna have to watch it. But by the way, all the E-Type owners, they're awesome. I have a '66, and it's my wife's favorite car we own. And period. I just wish it had another gear and a little bit more power.
Is it? Yeah. I mean, is it the kind of thing
stop?
Is it the kind of thing where you have to be? Do you have to have a mechanic as well when you buy the E-Type?
No. I mean, it's the only challenge with E-Types I find is they can run a little hot, and so they're tough if you live in a place with a lot of traffic. Those cars were born in an era when in the UK when everything was a roundabout, there were no traffic lights, and there was a fraction of the amount of cars on the road. So it was probably great in a drafty, cool UK back when the thing was designed. But truly not to. But sitting in traffic in Miami, it's gonna melt down.
Okay, Matt, I can't believe you haven't asked about the Dodge.
Yeah,
so am I going to have to bring it up?
No, I think so. You have on the list a Dodge Magnum SRT8. And I have a Dodge Challenger Scat Pack wide
and
body.
I just drove the Charger EV.
Oh, yep.
Okay, that's Phoenix, a very different thing. I'm thinking about
maybe not.
So the Magnum and the Challenger and the Charger, these are like you can get big inch motors like 6.1 or 6.4 liter V8s, and they've gone extinct. We've watched as they've died, and they'll never be made again.
For sure.
Is that why it's on the list?
Well, I have Dodge Demon number 35.
Ooh, nice. Unexpected.
So we helped Dodge get that model launched because they were struggling to get anybody crazy enough to insure Dodge Demons. So I guess I stuck my hand up. And by the way, I told Tim Kuniskis at the time when he was saying, would you insure Dodge Demons? And when he explained to me what the car was going to be, I said, I will tell you what, you go tell your board, I will insure every Dodge Demon you can make, but I won't insure every Dodge Demon driver. How about that? And he's like, I remember him kind of giving me, and he's like, I think I can make that work. I'm like, well, then go to town. Let's build these things. So yeah. So we have a manual Hellcat too.
How much do you love it? I mean, I think they're such amazing cars because they're big and roomy, and you got all the torque that you want, and it's just a fun boat to drive around the roads.
Well, you talk to our friends at the SCCA, Sports Car Club of America, which is always been a sports car club, and they have people they have a program they called Track Night in America, and they said you just wouldn't even believe how many people bring in Hellcats and Challengers to Track Night in America. And they said it was just not what the SCCA was about, but it's like people come to the track to have fun. And my view is all I care about is people coming to the track and having fun.
Yeah.
And so it's great. They're cool.
The Magnum is a station wagon.
It is a station wagon. Well, which, by the way, back to the Jaguar rebrand, I also think that's part of that design. It's not the brand, I don't know. But if you look at that design from the side, long hood, kind of like the E-Type, but kind of shooting brake look.
Totally.
And I think, like the Cadillac Celestiq, it's kind of shooting brake. And so I think it's a new shape. And so we call it station wagon, the Dodge SRT8.
I would call it a hearse, but that's just
right,
me.
a hearse, right? Yeah, that's funky. That's funky.
Yeah. Shooting brake is a nice way to say it.
It's a shooting brake. I don't have the right.
The Volvo
accent.
P1800 is kind of a little bit that
That's
shape
surprising.
as well.
Yep.
Right?
Another one of those, like, I think.
It's on your list, the 61 to 72 Volvo P1800.
Yeah, they were made for a long period of time. And, they were, again, kind of not the best performers. There were some really hilarious early reviews of these cars back in the day of, like, one of the most under-stressed motors, all of this kind of stuff. But, I've always thought they look cool. I've seen them done I've seen some pretty cool kind of resto modded ones too, where they're kind of set up, kind of track looking, and they're a good looking car.
And we can't forget the Volvo with the most miles on it ever. Irv Gordon drove that 3 million?
3 million miles. Yep.
The school teacher who owned the same car and drove it for 20 or 30 or 40
Was that
years.
a P1800 or
Yes.
P1800?
Yes.
Wow.
That's
I
a
tried to
Volvo.
buy it.
Oh, no way.
Because I wanted to get
It's
it to 5
iconic.
million. I thought I
cool.
wanted to get to 5 million, and I got outbid by Volvo. So as happens.
That's like going up against the house.
Yeah, you're
you're
lose.
not going to win.
You'll
By the way,
Yeah.
it's not the only car on your list with a Volvo motor.
Yeah, well, that's true. There we go. Well, the
DeLorean DMC-12. I went back and read some original reviews of the DeLorean, and they weren't as bad as I expected them to be.
No.
Later, people realized it was such a dog. I mean, 130 horsepower with a Volvo V6 in it. I don't know why.
What was some of the critique at the time?
The critique
Like, what
at
did
the
they say?
time said, listen, this car is comfortable and it handles reasonably well. It should be thought of as more of a GT than a sports car.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And
Okay.
to me, the biggest mystery is why didn't John DeLorean put a real power motor in here?
He was on drugs.
Oh, that's why.
I'm sure
Yeah.
there was some. That's a fascinating part of the story,
Yeah.
and I know our media teams have written a bunch of things. And in fact, one time when, let's just say, one of our celebrity writers for the magazine kind of dished on the DeLorean, we got a lot of criticism.
Who
for
was
it.
that celebrity writer?
Well, we'll just remain nameless. I'm sure you can look it all up online. But it was interesting because people ran to its defense, and we learned our lesson in the media world because so much of automotive media was about kind of ripping on one car or another, and that was like the tone. It had to be kind of biting or cynical, and I've really challenged that team to just say, look, there's somebody who loves every one of these things, and we're just
It's very personal.
Yeah, it's personal.
Yeah.
I mean,
really.
We got into it my sister had a Corvair, but somehow an article was written negatively about a Corvair, and I just got eviscerated.
Yes.
And I've just I can't tell you the number of apology letters and flowers to people I've sent because I'm like,
goodness.
really,
It
it wasn't meant to be mean.
It's a death trap, isn't it?
But it becomes part of someone's identity, and it's
yes.
in their memory.
Yes.
It's ingrained. I totally get it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Touchy. Yeah.
Well, it's been fun putting these things together and fun seeing the entry points.
Thanks
into the
for
car
coming
world.
to talk
And,
to us.
Yeah, we're
Yes.
just I'm thrilled you'd give it some attention, and
And I
love
also-
what you guys are doing.
I also want to say big news that Broad Arrow is now going to be the official auction house at Villa d'Este, which is, basically the highest end car show in
It's
the
the
world.
best. It's where the best of show cars go to be judged
Yeah.
against each other, and
It's
it's
quite a coup.
Villa d'Este and Lake Como, and we're thrilled that BMW, who owns that event, ran a big process, and we were glad we landed. They for them it was all about the style of how we do business and character and ethics and that sort of thing, and that's who they wanted to put in front of their guests. And I'm like, great, we're gonna go to town. We're gonna put on a great show. And so the auction business is a fun one, but it's one we're just gonna keep doing it really well. We're
Yeah.
going to focus on quality and.
Well, I was going to
excited.
ask, and I know you need to go, but I'm imagining that sale might be a very small curated sale,
Yes.
rather than more of a big volume.
Yeah, it would
sale.
be 80 cars
Cool.
kind of thing, which is over a couple of days. That's kind of what that market can absorb between all the Aperol spritzes and everything that everybody
The
has.
struggle's real.
The
Don't
struggle.
say too much because Matt will get really upset.
Yeah, well, you got to come. You have to come, and then
We'll send Hannah.
yeah, there we go.
Oh, he's like gritting his teeth right now.
But whereas like the Amelia type sales, those will be 150 cars, so a couple of days, long days, and some big cars being sold.
Well,
Fun.
thank you so much, dude, for coming in. It's been a real pleasure.
My pleasure, my honor. Yeah,
And hopefully we see you again soon.
Come back.
I will.
I'll just read off his list so that people know everything that was on it.
Great.
The 1978 to 1983 Datsun 280ZX.
Is that your personal favorite on this list?
No.
Okay.
I don't think they're in any particular order, is what I was going to say.
Okay.
I do kind of have a soft spot. My uncle had one at one point. Next is the 1981 to 1983 DeLorean DMC-12, which...
Cool. I've driven one. Doesn't drive great at all.
I have not driven one, but I can't imagine it's a good experience.
No, it's terrible. It's so slow.
So it's just the way it looks that people like.
Right, but now we have the Cybertruck, which kind of looks like the truck version of the DeLorean to me.
Good point. We talked about the E-Type, 1961 to 1964 Jaguar E-Type.
Can I say something about that? I'm actually curious. I'm surprised that it wasn't the Jaguar XJS that is actually on the list, because that's 90s era.
Yep.
That's sort of more in keeping with the rest of this list. Like they're saying the early 60s era E-Type. And I'm like, the rest of these dates are like 90s and 2000s. So I'm very surprised. I should have asked him about that.
I thought it was odd too. I mean,
right?
My friend's dad got one of these when I was in high school, and we thought it was awesome, but that was obviously 35 years ago. So
I feel like it should be the XJS.
I don't disagree with you, and I love the XJS.
Right.
The next one on the list is the 2003 to 2013 Lamborghini Gallardo 6-speed. And by the way, this reminds me that I totally forgot to ask him one of the most important questions to me, which is how big is the chasm in valuations between a manual and an auto box on a car that offered both as an option from factory?
He's definitely going to say the manual is worth more.
Of course.
But the question is how big? How much more? What's the premium?
Like on a Ferrari, let's say like a 355, right? The manual, which I got to drive again.
Should we discuss?
Well, did we not talk about it at all? All right, we'll talk about it after. But the manual must be worth far more than the auto box, right?
We got to email him about that.
Okay. The next on the list is the 2005 to 2008 Dodge Magnum SRT8.
Talk about an ugly car, to be honest.
Yeah,
it's a hearse.
Even as a Mopar fan, even if you appreciate this vehicle, how are you going to find one that hasn't been like wrecked 6 times with 200,000 miles on it? The next car on the list is the 1961 to 1972 Volvo P1800.
This is also the Saint era Volvo, isn't it? The one from the original movie, The Saint.
Yeah, and I feel like it should have been on the bull market list like last year or 5 years ago.
Also weirdly old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next one is the 1976 to 1989. Wow, they made it for 13 years. Ferrari 400/412, which we talked about.
And like, it's so weird to hear anyone say like this was quote unquote an embarrassing Ferrari. I mean, it's like, it's so niche. Because like, how could any Ferrari be embarrassing? But it is the lesser.
I remember watching Rain Man and thinking, I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to make Tom Cruise look like a total baller, wheeler dealer, but they should have put him in a better Ferrari. Anyway, great movie.
Cool.
2002 to 2006 Mini Cooper S.
Cute. I mean, I feel like you could get that from
You can get it cheap.
Like,
it's a driver's car.
Yeah, I think
you can get it with a stick.
One. Yeah, cool. Okay.
1997 to 2001 Honda Prelude. We talked about this. Oh my God. I will never forget driving out to the Bat Cave, which is what we called some random deserted driveway with my buddy John Lucier, listening to the new Ministry record and smoking cigarettes,
vibes.
Which,
Yeah.
Okay. The next one is the 2002 to 2008 Mercedes-Benz G500.
That's the one I want. That is classic, and I don't want to hear it about how much they cost to repair. Yeah, yada, yada, yada. It's awesome.
I just think if you're going to get a G-Wagon, if I'm going to get a G-Wagon, I would want one post-2018 because they're so much better to actually drive on the street. But they're not classic.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you like the modern G-Wagon, the current generation? You have no problem with it?
I like it much better than the old generation because it has the same look. The door has the same sound, which is the main reason you're buying it.
Right.
And it works better.
Okay. So, all right. Yeah, I don't have a strong feel. Like, I'm fine with the modern one too. But I mean, the originals are cool, and I think they're going to continue to just get cooler and cooler.
The last one on the list is the 1984 to 1990 Ford Bronco 2. We didn't talk about this one.
Yeah, I mean, if you're listening and you're Googling the Hagerty list, I love the livery on this Ford Bronco. It's like an off-white with sort of a burnt orange stripe on it with the word Bronco. It's very 80s. It's cool. I mean, at this point, every wealthy guy in Silver Lake and Montauk own one, so I'm sort of bored with the Broncos now, but I do really like the livery of this one, and I like that it's not a resto mod. I like that it's
And I imagine this is the last of the Broncos to be collectible because every Bronco, every era has been collectible.
Yeah.
I think every era has been on the list.
Pretty much.
So, because I remember when people started talking about getting OJ's Bronco, which is the one that was after this. Yeah.
Which also Peter Brandt had. Did you ever go to his house for like art parties and stuff?
No.
He had OJ's white Bronco and would park it on the lawn out at his house and just like throw parties around. It was kind of cool. Possibly morbid, but cool.
That is morbid and I'll say interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the whole list. And I mean, we talked about it. You could write to us and tell us what you think they left out.
Let us know.
What do you think is more collectible, and right now is the time to buy? I always say the BMW 6 Series from the late 80s.
Fine. I thought you would say a clown shoe BMW, but...
Oh, that's more in keeping with today's generation.
Possibly.
Yeah.
And I do think it's very interesting. No Porsches on this list.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they've kind of topped... I feel like they've probably... Even if you're talking 924, 928, 944, some of sort of the off models, they're not going to appreciate as much as these. I mean, it seems to be like this is what we're seeing.
I guess with 911s, there's no 911s anymore, right? No matter what. 993, 997.
The $500 911S that McKeel bought does not exist.
So you'd have to go 924, 928, 944.
I think those are still really exposed now.
All right, so let me just talk for a moment about the Ferrari that I got to drive.
Please.
A listener of the podcast wrote to me, months ago and was like, "Hey, I have a 355 and you're welcome to drive it." And I was like, "Yes," but we're both dads and we had trouble making our schedule work. Finally, we did. Thank you. It was a hair-raising, goosebump driving experience. I absolutely loved it. He had the gated shifter.
Amazing.
And I will say that when I was driving it, I thought, I need more hours of practice on this. Because I feel like if you get into the groove with that, you can really make it
Click
sing.
it. Yeah.
I mean, I was able to drive it and had a great time. But I just wanted more. Like the
what was
sound.
The setup? Like where did you drive it?
So he came
route?
over to my house on I want to say a Saturday morning, it was Friday morning after Thanksgiving.
Cool.
And it's like a midnight blue,
cool.
Same color as my 911, and with the same interior, beige kind of tan interior.
Cool.
Really beautiful. And I immediately thought, okay, when I get a Ferrari, I'm going to get midnight blue too. And very cool guy. He keeps it in storage at a place a little bit north of where I live. And
nice.
So we drove up to the storage place because he had also blocked the driveway when he was getting out, so we had to move. Anyway, it was great roads driving up there, and I just loved it. I drove it right away, and it's not obviously a race car anymore, and the acceleration isn't, by modern standards, impressive, but you don't think about that. You're just on the gas, and you're feeling so fast, and the sound is coming from obviously behind you. And it's
a full body experience.
You want it. He was like, listen, you got to get it above 7,000 RPM to really hear the right tone. Mm-hmm. And when I did, I knew exactly what he was talking about. And then the rest of the time, I was only trying to keep the revs up.
Yeah.
Just to hear that scream.
Amazing.
It was. I'm getting goosebumps now just thinking about it.
How did you fit in it? Like when you got in,
perfectly.
You fit fine,
I was worried
no
that I would be too tall or that the pedal box would be too small, and it is the toe box a little bit
those
constricted.
Italian men.
But it was not a problem at all. Like I wouldn't have qualms about buying one myself because I fit fine, and I'm 6'3", 200. So with big feet. But the other cool thing was, So I got to drive it. Also, the guy was very cool, and
That's great. Are you friends now?
Yeah, I hope so.
I hope I can meet him.
Yeah, you'll probably meet him. He is also a member of the Classic Car Club.
Amazing.
So,
cool.
and the other cool thing is we drove up to his warehouse where he keeps the car, and there was this dude there that I really want to introduce you to, who runs a company called HK Motors.
Okay.
And they sell Jim Glickenhaus's cars.
Oh, yeah.
So like the Boot,
Cool.
and they also sell these Chimera Lancias, which I had sort of peripherally heard of, but had never seen.
I don't think I was familiar. I Googled them after you mentioned them to me.
So hot.
They look really cool.
Yeah.
Really cool.
I mean, insane.
Are they actually selling these cars?
Yes, they are.
In the U.S.? Are they
in
legal?
the U.S. And the main reason I thought I got to introduce Hannah to this guy is because he has some sweet data about where they're going. So they don't put New York plates on them because people from New York don't buy them. He said much more often people from Connecticut or New Jersey.
Tri-state.
Yeah. But not New York for some reason. And they're also, I thought, interesting, it's an inline 4, a 2.1 liter inline 4, but apparently they scream. And one of the top models that they sell, which is less than $1 million, he thought that was great. I was like, still.
We're in a weird time right now.
Puts out almost 700 horsepower with an inline 4.
How much does the car weigh?
It must weigh close to nothing. I mean,
and these are manual? These
1,200,
are manual cars?
1,300 kilograms, and they're manual.
On 1,000 horsepower, which weighed basically nothing?
On a 700 horsepower.
Okay.
Because it's a twin turbocharged inline 4.
That's a lot to... That's a handful.
It's a lot to handle.
Yeah.
In fact, they sell, for less money, a street version that I would have chosen. I put some Instagram pictures up, and the red one is like the hot version, and the green one is the street version. I would opt for the street version.
So these are... do you have to give them a donor car?
I
or
think
do they
yes.
provide that?
No, well, I mean, maybe they can
They'll
hook it up
source
for you
it?
because they also are wheelers and dealers. But yes, you bring a donor car, and then they send it to Italy, and then Chimera makes it, and they bring it back.
Wow. Ooh.
Yeah.
I got to meet this guy.
Yeah, you really should.
I love how they look.
You have a list.
I do have a list, but we could save that.
Let's save it for next week because next week we'll have Benedetto Vigna, the CEO of Ferrari.
Yeah.
Yes. And I feel like you've driven some Ferraris.
I've driven some, and so have you now.
So
had you driven the car before you spoke with him? The 355.
I drove the car before I spoke with Benedetto Vigna.
Yes. Did it come up?
Yes, I talked to him about it for sure.
Okay, good.
But this is it now the second Ferrari? Because I drove the FF for a week.
Great.
And I loved it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this is only the second Ferrari that I've ever driven.
I predict there are more Ferraris in your future for 2025.
I sure hope you're right. And on that note, oh, by the way, our email address, we should tell people, is hotpursuit@bloomberg.net.
Yeah, and please feel free to email us. We read every email. We respond to all of them, I think.
I got some pretty amazing emails, or we got some pretty amazing emails.
Give us a minute to respond because, sometimes we don't respond right away, but we really love reading your feedback and your thoughts and comments. And thank you for listening, too.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we have fun doing this, right?
It's pretty fun.
We have the fun job here.
All right, that's it for this week. We'll see you next week. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Bloomberg.